one of the things is surround yourself with people who believe in you and who also see greatness in you. There's something really important about being in rooms and around people who see the greatness in you, who call that out in you, who encourage you and remind you who you are. Because we all need to be reminded at times of who we are and what we're capable of. And also, I would say that you have no idea what you're capable of until you test those boundaries. You don't know. And I bet that you're capable of so much more than you give yourself credit to. So much more.
You're listening to the Big Ideas Podcast with Ashlee Ilg. Tune in for honest conversations as we pursue bold dreams, redefine what is possible, and empower the next generation to live big. You'll hear stories that prove over and over again that just because something wasn't a part of our plan doesn't mean it won't be used for our good. Whether you're already an entrepreneur, you dream of becoming one, or you're raising the next generation of entrepreneurs, this podcast is for you. There's no time to waste on your big ideas. So let's get started. Here's your host, Ashlee Ilg.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I am so excited about today's conversation. I have a friend, Svetka Popov, here with me today. She is a speaker and author, the founder of the Legacy Mastermind, which we're going to love to hear all about that. And just all around, I think a good way to just, call you would be just an incredible, inspiring story sharer. I'm kind of jumbling all of that up. I think a good title would be for you, just an incredible story sharer. You have just a really cool way of just bringing stories to life. And I think I was trying to think back, Svetka, of when I first connected with you. And I think you had my friend and writing coach, Mary Morantz, on your show. And that's how I learned about your podcast, The Ones Who Dared. And immediately was just drawn to the way, like I said, the way you share stories and the way you just hold space for things that really matter. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm so glad I found you. And then was honored to be on your podcast. Was it last summer or last fall? I can't remember. Which was a joy. And yeah, just been staying connected with you, watching your pursuits and all of your fun adventures unfold. And yeah, just excited to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor, Ashlee.
Yes. So as you know, we love sharing just stories of the entrepreneurial pursuits, the way God loves to take our plans and go, oh, watch this. If you thought that was good, or if you feel like this is a little scary right now, just hold on, like I'm up to something. And so I would love for you to just kind of drop us into your story. I'd love to hear how your entrepreneurial journey started, what you've been doing over the past decades, like you shared, and what God's kind of put on your heart here in the last several years and what's building now.
Yeah. Well, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I think if I was to start in my story, I feel like for the last 2 decades, I really spent building a business, raising a family, and really trying to build the American dream. And what happened was my mom passed away just about 5 years ago. And that really took me on a whole unexpected path. It's a path that I've been avoiding, learning about history. I felt that as a young business and entrepreneur, that it was important to focus on the future and continue to build, and grind and be everything for everybody, volunteer in all the places while raising a family, while having a business and all of that, which can lead to burnout. And my mom's death really not only made me think about intention and legacy and really pause and say, okay, what am I actually building and what is all this for, right? And also learning her history. And then that led me to her mom's history, my grandma's history. I was able to learn that the sacrifices of the women who came before me were so great. My grandmother was not only in a German concentration camp as Eastern European worker, but she was also later arrested and sent to a prison in the Soviet Union and then sent to a Siberian gulag for her faith, and really was courageous in that. And my mom ended up growing up in the underground church in the Soviet Union and having this sense of courage and ability to be true to yourself no matter what the external circumstances are, which I think is such a gift now, because there's the circumstances around us will continue to challenge us, will continue to change.
Yeah.
But if we're able to stay true to who we are, to our faith, in a way that grounds us no matter what's happening, that is true superpower, right?
Mm.
And so in just learning all of that and taking a deep dive, I never really intended to write a book, but it led there. I never really intended to start a podcast, but it led there, right? Because as I was learning the stories and going around and traveling and flying to different states to interview people who were in the gulag, like my grandmother, who were in prison for their faith, who were persecuted, who were followed by the KGB, like my mom, I was able to really get a sense of how much courage and how much audacity and faith it took to be true to yourself. And I was so inspired by all these stories that I thought, gosh, I just wish that I could record this and other people can hear these stories and be inspired like I
Yeah.
am sitting across the table from these ordinary human beings doing extraordinary things. And that's where the Once Who Dare podcast was born. It's all about
Mm.
elevating stories of courage. And also, yeah, in that pursuit, I think it allowed me to really pivot a lot. It allowed me to heal a lot of the unhealed parts of my own story and begin to build something that is meaningful and something that I want to be proud of when I'm 80, when I'm 90. And so
Mhm.
I think I now think in terms of legacy and a long view versus like having just to build a business that's successful and all of that. And in that, I just started doing masterminds for women and creating spaces and events for people to fully lean in into who they are and for them to discover greatness that's within them because we all have greatness within us.
Mhm.
And so and that's kind of where my journey has been leading.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so we're gonna drop into a lot of that right there because you were making me think of so much. I mean, wow, what an incredible legacy you're already following along in. I mean, just incredible footsteps. I mean, I never met your grandmother or your mom, but I'm already inspired, you know? And I love the way you found a need, basically. You were inspired yourself and you were like, how do I share this with others? You know, I think it could be easy to just be like, wow, I valued that a lot. I benefited from that, learning all of that a lot, having the courage yourself to say, okay,
Yeah.
how do I share this with more people? I think that's amazing. Um, so I think as an entrepreneur myself, it would be really naive to say, okay, so you decided to do all these things and there were no challenges along the way, you know? We all laugh because we're like, haha, you traveled across the states and you learned all of these crazy personal, like kind of rebellious, very courageous stories. So, I mean, talk about some of the challenges, maybe like tangible challenges, but then also like what was changing in you the more and more you pursued these stories and learned more. I mean, I don't know the answer to any of this. So, like, did you overcome like any people pleasing or perfectionism or just like letting go? I know we've talked about surrendering but like on a day to day, like what was changing in you the more you pursued these stories? Like,
I
what did
think
they do to you? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, a complete transformation, honestly.
Yeah.
And how some of that happened, it was happening in layers. Not only did I begin to learn so much about what they overcome and the endurance that they had, the amount of sacrifice that, even my mom dropping her the life that she knew to say, okay, I don't know what's in the other side of this new country that I'm about to embark on. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I sure know that it is so much better than what we're leaving behind. So the risk is worth it, right? Because
Right.
what we're leaving behind is generational persecution for our faith. What we're leaving behind is lack of opportunity financially and freedom that we didn't get to have. So what I'm leaving behind and what I'm giving my children is freedom. I'm going to give them opportunity that I didn't have growing up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the opportunity that I got to have. And I think I didn't value that and appreciate that until I learned the stories. And unfortunately, when my mom already died.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big regret for me is that I didn't really take the time to learn the stories while they were alive. So if you're listening today and you have grandparents who are alive and mom and dad who are alive, go get their stories. That would be my encouragement to you is find out more about because we can always learn from the people before us. And yes, there may be generational things that we have to break and overcome, and it's not all one sided. But there's still lessons and
Mm.
things that they overcame that we can take with us and say, okay, if they did this, then I can do that. And so my personal story, I never intended to write a book, like I said. And one of the biggest challenging challenges to me was writing because English wasn't my first language. I had, I was not doing well in English. I really couldn't stand reading at all when I was a kid. And I think part of it was just reading books that you're interested in. So as I began to write and know that, okay, I am starting this journey of writing a book, it was extremely challenging. It's like I felt like God put something in my hand that I had that I'm not like a 10 out of 10 in, right? I'm like a 2 out of 10. And so
That's
having to
amazing. That's amazing. I love that.
and then also, I don't always pronounce everything right and all of those things. And then here I am recording a podcast. So I feel like I'm the least qualified to write a book. I'm the least
Mm.
qualified to have a podcast or to speak on stages and so forth. But that's kind of how God works sometimes is he is able to give us something that we, are working with and trusting him in the process. And for me too, the other part was I went to counseling for the first time for myself and just really exploring the unhealed parts of me and my own story. And that was really, really meaningful. And I was able to overcome a lot of mindsets and limiting beliefs that I had just growing up and things that, you are who you are based on the experiences you had. And essentially, the only limitation we have is between our ears, right? It's
Yeah.
like what we believe about ourselves, the story that we tell ourselves, our own narrative about what we're capable of, and so forth. So, I set myself out on a trajectory to say, okay, what else can I do and what is possible for me? Because if I'm able to do this, then so I just continue to challenge myself in various areas and do things that's scary and explore different things that is in line with where I'm going. It's not just random, even though, okay, hiking the Appalachian Trail was kind of random, but it was also in the honor of my grandmother because she was forced
Mm.
to walk about those 67 miles by the Nazis when she was forced out of her home into Germany. And so, doing these meaningful pursuits of, but also challenging myself and saying, okay, I know that I'm capable of more. And I think in doing so, I'm able to see greatness in other people. And I think that's why I'm really passionate about creating spaces for people where we can call the greatness within each other and see that in ourselves. Because it's usually harder for us to see the greatness within us than it is for me to see in you. It's like, Ashley, oh my gosh, you're so great at this. Like, how do you not see that? And it's like, well, thank you for reminding me. Kind of forget sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so when put a pin in talking about the Appalachian Trail because I definitely have that in my notes to ask you about that. I think that's so cool and it's just such a I mean it's real, but it's also like such a cool metaphor for your life, our lives, like the pursuit of something greater and bigger than ourselves and all that. So, I do want to come back to that. Um it's so inspiring. Um but I wanted to say this. So, and I don't really know how to say this because I've not really studied this too much, but I love how you kind of challenged the listeners. You did challenge us earlier, just a couple minutes ago, about really, while our ancestors are alive, our parents are alive, to really seek our stories more. And my mom just recently started looking into all the ancestral, family tree, all of that with her
Mhm.
mom's side of the family, which is my grandmother, and it's the grandparent that I've been the closest with my entire life. And I mean, I feel like I have a great relationship with her, but I moved away after college and all of that. And, as a little girl, you just don't think about these things that you're like, oh my gosh, I
Mhm.
should take, Gigi out to lunch and like pick her brain about her whole life. And like her mom and her grandmother. But I've been so thankful lately. My mom started doing that and taking the lead on that because my grandmother is still alive. She's in her 90s. And she recently discovered that we have like a pretty decent percentage of us is the Ashkenazi Jew, which is from Eastern Europe and
Mm,
part of Russia. And there's like nothing that we have been able to find. A lot of the family members that like came from that line don't have last names. And so we've been trying to like piece together like did they flee? I mean, they were definitely a minimized group of people. I'm sure there was persecution, but I can't really speak to a lot of it because there's not a lot to be found. So, but it's interesting. Like, I love hearing how you honor your story because I'm like, I want to do that more. And I want to, I want to find out as much as I can. As soon as my mom told me this, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know any of this was part of my DNA or my story or anything. But what do you do when you can't find anything? Like, I mean, what do we do?
Yeah, I've spent the last, couple of years pursuing that. So it was very challenging, especially when the war between Russia and Ukraine started. I was unable to really get any information. The archives, a lot of them were locked down, and
Mm,
I got a lot more from Germany. They were really good at having archives. I actually gotten a document of my grandma's concentration camp registration papers
wow.
with her name on it and where she was, the date, the location of the town that she was taken to. So I have a copy of that. It is hard because both of my paternal and maternal last names are fake. They
Right.
changed them due to persecution and having to they switch towns. So there's like a story underneath the story
Right. And I
of
think that's the
the
case. Yeah.
faking, and so a lot of people did they changed their identity, especially if they were in the communist perception successful by any means, which really meant like you own cattle, you have a piece of land, or you have a business of sorts.
Mhm.
So at that point in history, the government came in and would wipe those people out, would take their belongings. And so a lot of people, what they did is they took the belongings, whatever they could, and they fled. They changed their last names and they tried to relocate and erase their identity, which was a lot easier back then with all the digital stuff that we have now. That would be very hard to do now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I think just asking around as much as you can with extended relatives and so forth.
Mhm.
I remember when my mom first passed away, and I realized I really wanted to know a lot more about her, and I felt like I was missing that. When I called my aunt, my mom's sister, and I said, "Hey, can I fly over to Oregon and interview you? I really want to know more about mom and grandma." And she said, in a very like Eastern European way, "Why didn't you find out this information when your mom's alive?"
You're like, I'm sorry.
And I'm like, "Yeah, that would have been good, but we're here now."
Was she
Yeah.
helpful then?
Oh my gosh, she was the most helpful in this whole
Yeah.
process. Oh, anytime I call her, she'll give me information. She'll send me absolutely. But that's just the way it is. There's no sugarcoating. It's like
Yeah.
they just say what they mean and mean what they say, and you can't get offended because they're just speaking their mind. Like, well,
Right.
it's too late. You should have done this earlier. And it's like, thank you.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm aware of this. Yes. Thank you.
yeah.
Oh man. Well, yeah, that's encouraging. Hey friend, I wanted to take a quick pause to ask if you've taken the quiz yet to find out what type of dreamer are you. It's super important to discover what's working for you, but also some things that may be keeping you from really pursuing your greatest purpose. It takes just 2 minutes to find out if you're the skimboarder, the sunbather, the sandcastle builder, or the surfer babe. So jump over to dreamerquiz.com and be sure to share your results and tag me in it. Now back to the show. Okay, so I want to hop back over to your story of hiking the Appalachian Trail and why you did that. Maybe points along that journey. I don't know how long it took you. I know you were posting about it a lot. I think that's when I was starting to follow you as well too, because I was like, what is she up to? This looks insane. Um, and I love asking loaded questions. I keep finding myself asking like 3 questions in one. But like along that journey, like where did God meet you? Were there things that he brought to light in sort of that endurance-y, just I know for me personally, whenever I'm experiencing something that's super challenging physically, and I get to the end of myself, either physically, mentally, all of it, emotionally, I feel like that's when I'm saying this out loud as I'm listening to myself say this out loud. Like, I feel like that's when God meets me most, but he's probably always waiting to meet me, but I just have to get to the end of myself for me to realize like, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore in my own strength. I can't, I'm at the end of myself. Okay, God, I'm ready for you now, and he's like, oh my gosh, I've always been here, but share with us about your hike, why you did it. I know you said you were honoring your grandmother and her incredible walk, and incredible in not a great way. But maybe things that God taught you along that adventure, that journey.
Yeah, so my grandmother was forced to she was only 16 years old when she was taken from her home, and essentially at that time there was the Nazis were collecting youth from Eastern Europe, and they were called the Osterbiters, which means Eastern European workers. And in the journey, when she was taken from her home, they gathered people in the center town. Essentially, you were, if your name was on the list, you had to come out. Otherwise, your family was at risk of, getting their house burned down or someone else in your family being taken instead. So it wasn't a volunteered.
Mm.
It wasn't really an option. You had no choice but to go. And so when she was taken, the way that my grandmother writes in her letter and in the interviews that I listened of her is that they had to walk approximately 67 miles with only one night rest in a barn. And to me, that was, I know that my grandmother, was not someone, they were really poor at that time with the wars and everything that was going on. There was a lot of scarcity and lack. And so for her to have endured that walk, I thought, okay, well, can I do this? I want to be able to set myself on this journey and also to be able to have the time to really reflect and in that, I recruited a few friends, one who is like a really experienced hiker, the other one is a marathon runner. And the two of us had never done this before, the overnight backpacking. And we gave ourselves about a week to get this accomplished. And we had provisions of food and all the things. And I think in setting myself out on this journey, I realized that we are capable of so much more than we give ourselves credit to. If we put our minds to something, then we are able to do that. So in the times that you're on your like last mile a day, which we try to do around 6, 7 miles a day, sorry, 12 miles, that was like lunchtime. And then as we get to that, it's like, your feet are hurting and everything, but you know the why behind it. The other reason too that we were really pushed ourselves is we were raising money for charity water. So building a well for people in need who don't have clean water.
Mm.
So that gave us an extra push to really go for it because it wasn't really about us. And I
Yeah.
think that when we do things that aren't self-centered, aren't about us, we're able to do so much more. It's easier to figure out the how when we know the why behind what we're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So you did that in a week, you said? Wow. All right. I know you're working. You've mentioned your book project, and it's an incredible undertaking. And I didn't even know your background with, English not being your first language and all of those things that it's so easy to disqualify ourselves for, which I think just makes the story even better because, God is in it. And I so respect your obedience in showing up and trusting that he'll equip you and he'll, give you the words and give you the pronunciations of the words and all the things when you do that. So, um, you know, how does stewarding a project like this change you? How do you show up each day? Like, what is your attitude as you show up each day, knowing that this is, it's a responsibility that you're carrying, but it's not necessarily yours.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I've come to a point of complete surrender because, I'm not in charge of the timing and how things happen. I know that this is something that was handed to me and I have to steward and be diligent with fulfilling my part and leave the rest to God and his timing because um, I worked on the manuscript diligently, fulfilled that, did the interviews, all the things to prepare for that. And there was a lot of rejections along the way of agents who said no, and just people not grabbing to the vision. And really, in my innermost being, I knew exactly who I wanted for to represent this particular project as my agent. And everyone in the publishing industry that I worked with, whether it was my editor, who's a New York Times bestseller, or a coach who's also published many books and guides a lot of authors. They all said, Svetka, like you're shooting for the moon, like this is not something that you should just get an agent that's like really beginning. Someone with your platform is not going to get an agent of that caliber, but God. So I was like, all right. And so in my notes, I would write, this person is my agent and they're so excited about this project and to get a
Mm.
right publisher for this project. And years went by and I just got so many rejections. And then lo and behold, it's a long story, but essentially I did get the call eventually. And I told God, like, I want to be rejected by everyone but the one person. And I would prefer for this person to be her. And if not, then, I'm just trusting you. And so what happened was I got a call and that agent called me and said, "Hey, Sveka, if anyone should represent this book, it should be me." And I was like, okay, the timing wasn't what I expected it to be, right?
Hmm.
And so right now we're pitching publishers, and publishers are saying the same thing, like, well, the platform isn't where it needs to be in order to really get this out into the world. But I'm trusting God's timing.
Yeah.
So I know that everything will happen in the time that it needs to happen. And I'm going to be on Women's International Day too. I'm launching a new podcast called The Women Before Me, which is really giving tribute and honor to the women who came before us, whether it was a mother, a grandmother, a teacher, a coach, or adoptive mother, grandmother, aunt, whoever, to really honor the people and legacies before us on Women's History Month and International
Hmm.
Day. And I have an incredible lineup of guests that I'm really excited to really bring that to attention, because I think it's worth bringing to attention. It's worth highlighting that we can be so inspired by the people who came before us and ways that they contributed and shaped us who we are today.
Yeah. That's awesome. We'll definitely be looking forward to that coming out. It's probably going to be right around the same time that this episode is launching. So that's exciting. Um, so I have one more, a little bit more of like a practical question for you. And it's just because of some things I, have seen you talk about and do and share. And I respect it, and it's inspiring to me. So I'd love to kind of get your gauge on what are some things that you do, like in a practical way to like regulate your well-being, to stay healthy
Mm,
physically, emotionally, mentally. I see you post things about like, nervous system regulation, things like that. I think it's just really important, especially for women as we're pursuing, big projects, things beyond ourselves. There is an aspect of, a huge aspect that we can't just, you mentioned burnout briefly at the very beginning, and obviously nobody wants to burn out. Nobody thinks they're burning out until they
right.
are.
Mhm.
Um, so from like a proactive, preventative standpoint, what are some things that you do or things that you would encourage our listeners to do that have worked for you to continue pursuing these things, hiking the Appalachian Trail, pursuing stories that really change, like you said, it changes everything, transformed everything. Those are not big things for your heart and your mind to carry. So what do you do to kind of regulate
Yeah,
yourself, along the way?
that's a really great question. I think as a business owner, and anything that you're stewarding, right? But having stewarded a business for the last 2 decades, one of the biggest things that I would really leave a listener with is it's so important to invest in yourself, because a business and any endeavor really expose the unhealed parts of you. And so I'm a huge advocate for investing in yourself and investing in your well-being, investing in your growth and your mindset and your health, because you can't do incredible things and make a great impact if you're neglecting your own self and putting yourself in the back burner. And so investing in you, and also you can invest in your team. If you're leading a team, which we've been leading a team for the last 2 decades, too, is in order to invest in them, you're giving them what you have. And if you're giving people leftovers and a burnt out version of you and an unhealed version of you, that's going to come out in your leadership, on your team, and the culture that you're running in your business, your company. So for me, some of the practical things is I really do in this decade. I just turned 40 last year. I am really investing in my health in a way that I've never have before. Got blood work done, so I'm taking supplements and really aligning that to what I need specifically for me. Because we can just randomly take supplements and do all these things, and you think you might be hitting the markers, but don't we want to put in the energy? Because one of the most important things is the energy that we give and the time that we have, right? If we
Mm.
can use that well, we can do so much. So working out for me is also non-negotiable. I spend time working out. I also spend time having solo moments with myself, whether it's in silence, whether it's in walking, definitely exercising. Like I said, strength training has been a really big part of this period of my life. Again, I didn't take it seriously before, but now I am.
Mm.
And also, the other thing that I started implementing is one solo trip a year for myself. And that could be investing in a particular lane that I am growing in, whether it's speaking or writing, or I've done like the Bob Goff retreats, I've done other speaking conferences, or sometimes just taking a solo trip with just you.
Mm.
So this gives you time to declutter, not have any outside pressure or voices. And doing that, I found is super helpful for your growth and for you to come back with full battery for your team, your family, whoever is in your world. And then I now do a solo date of once a week, which is very new. Also, I just want to say that I'm in a completely different season. So if you're a mom with littles, what I'm saying to you is probably really not attainable or not as attainable. I know it wasn't for me. At least I can speak from that. So sometimes people look at my current rhythms and the way that I'm doing life, and it may feel like, it's easy to compare or feel like I'm doing something that is, and they may not be able to do in the season. I have moms who follow me and even my sister-in-laws and sisters, and they're like, gosh, we wish we were in your season. And I'm like, but I was there.
Yeah.
I was there during the littles, and that is a harder time to really pull away and have like a solo date once a week. You're probably using that time to go on a date with your husband if you can even do that, right? So there's a lot of, I think it's important to know the season that you're in and know the
Yeah.
time that you're in, because you can't do all the things in all the seasons, but do what you can with what you have.
Yeah. Yeah, and I loved what you said earlier, the point that you said about you can't give your leftovers. Whatever you're putting into yourself is what you're going to pour out to others. You reference your team and family. And I would definitely, make that specific to moms with kids. I mean, speaking from experience, I know you would agree too. It's just if you're depleted by the end of the day, or even by 9 a.m. sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm waving my white flag and it's 9 a.m. I love that point. I think it's just such a good reminder, whether we're growing a business team, whether we're leading our employees or just our team members or our children, taking care of ourselves. Even if it's harder in certain seasons, there's still you know pieces that we need to do, or
Yeah.
our kids and everyone around us is going to get a pretty rough version of us. And I've always been an advocate of that. It's definitely been harder in different seasons. Like I said, I've got kids in a really huge age range at this point. Um, and just hearing you talk about like the solo dates and the solo trips, I'm like, I've done all of those things, and it just makes me like exhale and like breathe a little deeper. Like, oh, I need to do more of that. Like just thinking about it is like
Yeah.
just that space to exhale and reflect and just, yeah, not have the pressure of anybody else's urgent needs at that time.
Mhm.
It is so refreshing.
Yeah, and I find myself coaching so many women in, when they are towards the end of their 30s and they've been raising their families and they're just so burnt out and they're like, Sveka, what do we do? How do we, and they become resentful towards their spouses or, but at the same time, I'm like reminding them that you've actually allowed this and you tolerated this. So therefore, you've essentially taken so much on and you say, I got this. So of course your spouse is going to kind of trust that you've got this
Right.
and they're not going to be involved in certain areas. But having to operate with boundaries and also with your capacity and taking that time away, because I think what saddens me the most is when women put themselves on the back burner to the point that they don't prioritize themselves or their well-being until there's an emergency situation
Right.
where it's like a near death experience. And then what happens when that near death experience happens? The schedule gets rearranged. They're being prioritized. They're like, okay, take the rest, take the week off. Like, we are going to serve you, we're going to take care of you until you get well. But why do we have to wait until we get to the point of burnout? Why
Hmm.
not say, how can I, in the time that I have, the resources that I have, create practical rhythms of rest so that I don't get to that point? Maybe it looks like you going to the gym once a week and then doing small workouts during the day with your kids. Maybe it looks like you going for a coffee date in the morning, or maybe it's just having your husband take care of kids in the morning so you can have quiet time in a different room that
Hmm.
kids don't have access to you. I don't know what that looks like for you. You know what works for you, but I think that when there's such a disaster situation that is an emergency, we change everything. When you have a heart attack and you survive the heart attack, now you're rearranging your whole life. Wait for the heart attack. Let's take care of it now and create rhythms that will help you to succeed and create the greatest impact.
Yeah. So as you're saying that, I'm hearing your what you called your Eastern European tell it like it is. You almost kind of sound like your aunt, like, well, could we have not done this sooner? I was like, oh my gosh, your stories come full circle. I love it. Oh man. Okay. So I've got kind of like a final, maybe kind of wrap up question. We'll see where this goes. But kind of pulling everything together that you've talked about. So I'd love for you to just speak to the listener who does feel like they are stewarding something massive, maybe something like a 67-mile hike, something that they've never done before. They feel ill-equipped. They feel disqualified for, but they cannot deny that God is calling them to do this, asking them to do this, kind of requiring them to do whatever this thing is, whatever this project is. What would you say to them as they pursue this, mountain-sized dream pursuit, when most days they might feel too small or, like I said, not equipped to do it?
That's a great question. I think one of the things is surround yourself with people who believe in you and who also see a greatness in you. There's something really important about being in rooms and around people who see the greatness in you, who call that out in you, who encourage you and remind you who you are. Because we all need to be reminded at times of who we are and what we're capable of. And also, I would say that you have no idea what you're capable of until you test those boundaries. You don't know. And I bet that you're capable of so much more than you give yourself credit to. So much more. And so I think it's important to really ask yourself of, what am I actually building? And what do I intend with this endeavor, right? What do I want to accomplish with this? And understanding the why behind it, because when you know why you're doing something, the way that it's done, it becomes really clear and easy.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. There's something so powerful about community, and
Yes.
there's a quote that I'll think of when we're not trying to think of it, but yeah, just the power of, like you said earlier, having people that know you well enough to speak to you when they know you need it, even before you might even know you need it, to remind you who you are and whose you are. And because God is good and great and bigger than all of it, it's all possible. And that was definitely a paraphrase of the quote. It was much more eloquent than that, but
Yeah, I think also to know that the difference between you and maybe somebody that you're trying to achieve the level of, or someone you aspire to be, the only difference between you and them essentially is the narrative that you believe about yourself and what's in between your ears, right? So how do you get to that next level? And the way to do that, the fastest way to get there is to surround yourself with people who are already there or where you're trying to go, because they will be able to slash those limiting beliefs. And because we don't know how to do something if we've never seen it done, right? So you need to see a version of what you're trying to do in a way that, oh, that's possible for me. If it's possible for someone else, that's also possible for me.
so good. That's so, so good. I think that's a great way to wrap up the conversation. I appreciate your wisdom and your insight. And yeah, I love the way you share the stories. I just love it. I can't wait for your book to come out, and I can't wait for your next podcast season to launch and all the things. Yes, thank you so much for being here. Tell us all the ways we can find you and follow you. I know everybody's going to want to join you in your world and become part of all of your great stories too.
Yeah, so you can find me on my website, svetkapopov.com. That's Svetkapopov.com. And on there, I'm also on Instagram. The Once We Dare podcast is where all podcasts are found. And by this time, the Women Before Me podcast should also be where all the podcasts are
Yes.
found. So, yeah.
Yes. So when you're done listening here, just go listen over there and it'll be a great little duo. Love it. Well, goodness, thank you so much for being here, Svetka. Thank you for sharing all of this. And for everybody listening, thank you so much for joining us. As always, keep your big ideas coming, and we will see you on the next episode. Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in today. Before you go, it would mean the world to me and my family if you would share this episode with at least one person who you think might benefit from this message. And of course, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. You can also follow me at Ashlee Ilg on Instagram to keep up with our adventures and for continued encouragement as you pursue your big ideas. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time.